All right, as we study business organization law, we are going to run into default rules of business organization law and mandatory rules of business organization law. What are default rules and what are mandatory rules? Well, default rules are rules that parties can change by contract. So if we enter into a business organization, there are going to be certain default rules that govern our relationship and govern the business organization. If we want to change those, we can. There are also certain mandatory rules that will govern our relationship and govern the business organization. And if we want to change those rules, we cannot. So let's talk about why default rules are there. Default rules are in the law so that the parties will not have to reinvent the wheel every time they enter into a transaction. In this sense, the default rules should replicate private ordering. They should replicate what parties would adopt if they drafted a contract, if they drafted their own rule to address the situation. The default rule should be the most efficient rule in most situations. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be the most efficient rule in every situation. There will be situations where parties will want to change the rule, and we'll call that an idiosyncratic transaction. It's a situation not like the rest or most of the transactions where the parties want a different rule. And with default rules, if you want to change the rule, if you have an idiosyncratic transaction, the burden is on you to change the rule. If you do not change the rule, the default rule will still apply, and it will apply to your idiosyncratic transaction, and it then might not come out to an efficient result. Mandatory rules are the same in the sense that they are the most efficient rules in most situations. But for some reason, the legislature or even the court has said you cannot change this rule. And there's probably a couple variables working here. For most mandatory rules, idiosyncratic transactions that would want a different rule are very few in number. So we don't expect that there would be many idiosyncratic transactions that would change the rule. In addition, there is something going on with respect to the rule that it is subject to potential abuse. Maybe there can be abuse because information costs will be high or collective action costs will be high. For whatever reason, this rule, changing it would give rise to potential abuse, and so the legislature or the court says you cannot change this rule. As we go through the course, we'll look at the default rules, we'll look at the mandatory rules, and we'll ask ourselves, is this an efficient resolution of this problem?